Today we're doing the 10 players that absolutely belong in MLB's Hall of Fame. We're doing things a little bit differently though. We're going to do 10 players that all play different positions. So we're going to field an entire team of guys that should be elected into the Hall of Fame and why they should have been in the Hall of Fame. And I don't really know why most of these guys fell off the ballot. I just want to start by saying we're not going to be talking about anybody from the steroid era, except for one guy. I'm sure you can guess exactly who that player is going to be. Spoiler alert, it's Barry Bonds. I don't want to talk about Roger Clemens. I don't want to talk about Alex Rodriguez. I get it. It's obvious that these guys should be in the Hall of Fame. But I personally can't stand Alex Rodriguez. He's really fucking annoying. And Roger Clemens has he had an affair with a 15-year-old girl. He's a dog shit human. A-Rod doesn't have that type of history as far as I know. So that's just like a personal vendetta. But Roger Clemens is just a bad person. And I'm not interested in sitting here and trying to defend his case for the Hall of Fame. We all know Roger Clemens was one of the greatest pitchers of all time. And we all know that he took a bunch of steroids, and we know why he wasn't included. I felt like this would be a much better exercise if we didn't include all the steroid guys, because otherwise this whole list would be packed full of them. Obviously, they had incredible stats. Rightly so, they were all juicing. I'm going to go in position order, but I'll start in left field because I want to talk about Bonds. I think it's an important discussion to have. Barry Bonds is the most egregious Hall of Fame snub of all time. I don't care that he took steroids. It's over. It's in the past. That was 20 years ago. There's plenty of guys in the Hall of Fame that cheated. There are steroid users inducted into the Hall of Fame, but they were nicer to the media, so David Ortiz got in. I don't know. I think it's ridiculous. There were spitballers that have been inducted into the Hall of Fame. There are guys that have been accused of being on amphetamines. There are so many different baseball players that were accused of cheating, or there was evidence that they cheated, and there's some sort of like super high standard about the steroid era, the era that literally saved baseball from the dumps, and they're not inducting anybody from that era into the Hall of Fame. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's absurd. And left field is obviously Barry Bonds. He's the best player of maybe all time. You could argue that because of the steroid allegations and what's going on with that. And that's totally fine. But nobody can argue that Bonds is one of the greatest players ever. He's got 162.8 WAR. He's got nearly 3,000 hits with 2935, 762 home runs, the most home runs ever in history. A 182 OPS plus across a 22-year career where he had 7 MVPs and I don't know how many gold gloves. Let's see. That's 7 gold gloves, 1 million silver sluggers. Bonds is just one of the greatest players of all time. The most intentional walks ever, the most WAR ever, the most home runs ever, the most walks ever. This guy is like, if you have a Hall of Fame and you don't have Bonds in, what are you doing? Like, it's not really a Hall of Fame. I get it. You can be against steroids. It wasn't even really a rule at the time in baseball. They let that go. This isn't like Pete Rose, who gambled on baseball. That was strictly illegal. That was completely immoral. And it just brings into question the integrity of the league. Steroids, I guess you could say, brought in the question of integrity of the league into play, but that's a question of Bud Selig's integrity, man. He was the guy that didn't regulate or stop this from happening. Meanwhile, the Olympics prevented people from taking steroids for years before that. I don't know. I think the league needs to take responsibility for that. I think that Barry Bonds should absolutely be in the Hall of Fame. If the best player of all time is not in your Hall of Fame, it becomes a joke. So now that I got the steroid rant out of the way, let's go to our first position that we're going to talk about. That is starting position. And I'm telling you, David Cone belongs in the Hall of Fame. This is a guy that doesn't get enough credit. 62.3 WAR. 60 WAR should be basically the Hall of Fame standard. If a guy gets that in their career, I think that they should probably most likely be inducted into the Hall of Fame. If we look at the list of Jaws leaders, we're going to be talking a little bit about Jaws here today. So if you don't know what that is, Jaws is basically a number that averages a 7-year peak WAR along with the player's career WAR. So it's a really good indicator of if a player should be in the Hall of Fame. David Cone is all the way at 48 in terms of Jaws. He's surrounded by guys that are in the Hall of Fame, except for Louis Tiant, who I have a video on already. So I didn't want to bring up Tiant's name, but he would definitely be on this list as well. The next non-Hall of Famer is CC Sabathia, who's probably getting elected this year. And then Brett Saberhagen's down here, who has a good case for the Hall of Fame. Wes Farrell also doesn't make the Hall of Fame here. Jim McCormick, those guys should probably be in the Hall of Fame. They played many years ago. I am not qualified to talk about them. The other guys that didn't make the Hall of Fame are Rick Rushell. Rushell? I think it's Rushell. Rushell. I used to call him Rushell as a kid. I don't remember how to pronounce his name properly, but he should definitely be in the Hall of Fame as well. Kevin Brown, it's just a bunch of steroid guys or active players that aren't Hall of Famers that are on this list that are ahead of David Cone. The reason that Cone didn't get elected into the Hall of Fame is because he didn't have the counting stats. He had 194 wins. He didn't have 300 wins. He only had 2,668 strikeouts. He didn't have 3,000. Well, I got bad news for baseball and baseball writers and these old fogies. You're not getting those numbers ever again, probably. There's going to be very, very few pitchers that ever hit 3,000 strikeouts again. They're definitely, I don't think we're ever going to have a 300 game winner again, unless like one of these guys that have been around for like 20 years, like Verlander, is really close. I don't know his numbers. I don't think he is, though. Verlander has 262 wins. He would have to probably play another 3 years to get up to 300. There's a chance. I'm never going to deny that Verlander has a chance at playing another 3 years. I'll be honest. But like Kershaw is a great example. One of the greatest pitchers we've ever seen, 212 wins. 300 wins is going to be almost impossible to reach at this point. Wins shouldn't even matter in terms of pitchers. I think he hopefully he gets elected on one of those veteran committee ballots in the next couple years. Because frankly, he deserves it. This is a guy that had a perfect game, has a Cy Young, was in the top 5 of Cy Young voting 4 different times, and also was in 6th in Cy Young voting another year. This guy is just an absolute incredible ball player. One of the best pitchers I ever saw while I was growing up. And somehow he's not in the Hall of Fame. Man, there's going to be a lot of ranting in this video because now we're talking about relief pitchers. These guys never, ever get the credit that they deserve, man. I get it, man. Relief pitchers don't have a lot of WAR. They don't have a lot of the counting stats. How can they? They pitch 1 inning a game. But they are one of the most critical roles in all of baseball. You never see a team win a World Series if they don't have a good bullpen. And the most egregious snub from the Hall of Fame right now is Billy Wagner. But I'm not going to talk about Billy Wagner because I'm pretty sure the voters are going to do the right thing and vote him in this year. We're going to instead talk about Joe Nathan. On the Jaws list, Joe Nathan is the 7th best reliever ever. And he was a one and done guy on the ballot. This is a guy with 377 saves in his career, a 1.12 career whip, 2.87 ERA. Joe Nathan was one of the scariest, most shutdown closers ever. 6-time All-Star, 1-time Rolaids reliever of the year. Twice he was in the top 5 for Cy Young voting. He was just one of the best, scariest closers of all time. He is my pick for most egregious relief pitcher not in the Hall right now. There's a lot of relievers that deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, though. I was making this about one player only for each position, but, you know, you need those bullpen guys. There's plenty that could be inducted. I don't know, man. Relievers obviously don't get the credit that they deserve. Joe Nathan should definitely not have been a one and done guy. Hopefully, baseball can rectify this situation and start to give relievers the respect they deserve. My pick for catcher is going to be Thurman Munson. Okay, Thurman Munson's life was tragically cut short on August 2nd, 1979. He was only 32 years old. He was in the middle of an incredibly successful baseball career as a catcher. He put up 46 WAR as a catcher. If we look at the Jaws leaderboard, every single catcher that's above Thurman Munson has made it into the Hall of Fame. He is considered the 12th best catcher basically of all time if you use Jaws as a metric. And this is a guy who had his career cut short after 11 years. He absolutely belongs in the Hall of Fame. He was one of the great catchers of his era, but he just doesn't get the respect because his career wasn't long enough. I'm not really sure what the logic was behind the voters. I don't want to speak about what I think that they thought at this time, because this was a tragedy. You know, this was something that was horrible, a very, very sad accident. 7-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year, and MVP. He was in MVP voting for 6 straight years. He's got 3 Gold Gloves. Thurman Munson was the best catcher of his era and one of the best catchers of all time. A top 15 catcher of all time belongs in the Hall of Fame. I'm sorry, guys, you got it wrong. First base is a really, really interesting one because a lot of the guys that I would definitely want to be on this don't qualify. There are a lot of active guys. You got Albert Pujols, who retired last year, so he's not eligible for the Hall of Fame yet. Same with Miguel Cabrera. Joey Votto, did he technically retire? I'm not sure if it counts or not. He was in the Blue Jays minor league system this year. Paul Goldschmidt's still active. Mark McGwire, steroid guy. Rafael Palmeiro, steroid guy. Look who's next on the list, though. We got Keith Hernandez. Keith Hernandez, again, 60 WAR. Okay, 60.3 WAR. How are you not electing him into the Hall of Fame? How does he miss out on that? I have no idea. He was one of the best defensive first basemen of all time. This guy won 2 World Series, 2 Silver Sluggers, 11 Gold Glove Awards, an MVP, and a batting title to go along with 5 All-Star appearances. When you look at just the accolades alone, I don't understand how Keith Hernandez is not a Hall of Famer. It's a tragedy that he's not. I think that it's punishment for the whole cocaine controversy scandal back in the 80s. That's my guess. That's my theory on why they didn't elect Keith Hernandez. At the time, he was probably a top 10 first baseman of all time. This guy could do it with the glove and with the bat. I don't know. I think Keith Hernandez should be easily a Hall of Famer. Second base has quite a few candidates. For some reason, second base has been kind of like, I don't know, taken for granted by the Hall of Fame voters. Bobby Grich is 8th all time in terms of Jaws. He had 71.1 WAR. Bobby Grich should have easily been a Hall of Famer. I don't understand. I've seen his numbers. He's just an incredible ball player. He's the only guy in the top 11 that hasn't been inducted into the Hall of Fame, except for Cano, who did steroids and also isn't even qualified to be voted into the Hall of Fame yet. He hasn't been retired for 5 years. Somehow Bobby Grich is not in the Hall of Fame. Okay, 71 WAR, 371 OBP, a 125 OPS plus. Bobby Grich is one of the best second basemen of all time. It's egregious that he's not in, but he's not even my pick for this because who I picked is actually Lou Whitaker. Now, Lou Whitaker, I'm a little biased towards because I never got to see Bobby Grich play, but I did catch the tail end of Lou Whitaker's career. He is a 75 WAR player, 276 batting average, 363 OBP, and a 117 OPS plus. Lou Whitaker is 13th on this list, so he's right behind Bobby Grich. And I just think that he needs to be in the Hall of Fame. 3-time Gold Glove, 5-time All-Star. He won World Series. He was a Rookie of the Year, 4-time Silver Slugger. His partner in crime, his partner throughout their entire careers was Alan Trammell, who finally made the Hall of Fame a few years ago. And Alan Trammell has almost identical numbers to Lou Whitaker. If we just compare their numbers side by side, Lou Whitaker has 75.1 WAR to Alan Trammell's 70.6. They both have 8,000 at-bats. They both have 2,300 hits. Lou Whitaker outpaces him in home runs by 60 home runs. Whitaker had a 276 average compared to Alan Trammell's 285. They 1,300 runs scored from Whitaker, 1,200 for Trammell. 1,000 RBIs each. Whitaker had 100 less stolen bases, like 98 stolen bases less. 363 OBP, a 352 OBP, 426 slugging, 415 slugging, 789 OPS, 767 OPS, 117 OPS plus, 110 OPS plus. They're damn near identical fucking players. They both played their careers together for 20 years, 19 years, 20 years. From 77 to 95, they were teammates up the middle for the Tigers, and they played there the entire time. Why is it that Alan Trammell is in the Hall of Fame and Lou Whitaker is not? How does that make sense? I want somebody to explain that to me. Please let me know in the comment section if you have an explanation as to why Alan Trammell made the Hall of Fame and Lou Whitaker didn't. Okay, and it took Alan Trammell a really long time to make the Hall of Fame anyway. But hopefully Lou Whitaker's time is coming soon, because it is egregious that he's not in the Hall of Fame alongside his 20-year running mate. For third base, we're talking about Jaws again. Look at these top 13 players. All 13 of them are in the Hall of Fame, except for Graig Nettles. Why isn't Graig Nettles in the Hall of Fame? I couldn't even begin to understand why he didn't make it. I guess it's because he didn't have the counting stats again. 2,225 hits, 390 home runs, a 67.9 career WAR, 110 OPS plus, 750 on OPS. Graig Nettles was considered one of the greatest defensive third basemen of all time. His career was 22 years long. He had 6 All-Star appearances. He was top 5 in MVP voting twice, 2 Gold Gloves. He was an ALCS MVP. He won 2 World Series. Where is Graig Nettles in the Hall of Fame? Again, we go back to what I was saying before. One of the top 15 third basemen of all time. Why don't you have Graig Nettles in your Hall of Fame? It just doesn't make sense, except for from the counting stats perspective. But like, he's a third baseman. He's not a center fielder. He's not a first baseman. They're not going to have as many counting stats as those other guys. Graig Nettles needs to be in the Hall of Fame. This man is 80 years old. Can we please finally get him into the Hall of Fame before his life is inevitably over? Because he deserves that honor. Next up, we're talking about shortstops, okay? And again, we're not going to be talking about Alex Rodriguez. You know the deal, steroids, blah, blah, blah. But we're talking about instead Bert Campaneris. Not the flashiest of players, not the greatest of numbers, 6-time All-Star, 3-time World Series champion. Back in the 70s, the Oakland Athletics were dominating baseball. It was all about Oakland, it was all about Cincinnati, and it was all about Baltimore. Those were the 3 teams that were really dominating baseball. Bert Campaneris was the shortstop of the Oakland A's, the team that won 3 World Series. Campaneris was an incredible player, especially at the time. He didn't have the home run numbers. He didn't have enough hits, 2,249 hits. He was a stolen base machine, 649 career stolen bases. Just a very, very good anchor on multi-time World Series teams. This is the only guy on this list that you could say is perhaps maybe a little bit of a reach, because typically shortstops have actually been treated pretty well outside of obviously A-Rod for the reasons that we already listed. Bill Dolan, he was a phenomenal player, 75 WAR, but you know, know. He played in the 1800s or the early 1900s. I don't know enough about him to be talking about him. I'm not going to sit here and want him in the Hall of Fame, but I do want Bert Campaneris in the Hall of Fame. 21st shortstop all time. He's surrounded by guys that made the Hall of Fame. Luis Aparicio, Dave Bancroft, Joe Tinker, Willie Wells, Huey Jennings, Travis Jackson, Phil Rizzuto. These were all guys that made the Hall of Fame that had worse careers than Bert Campaneris, who again was playing a critical position for 3 World Series winning squads. I think that Bert Campaneris deserves his flowers for that. We already talked about left field, so let's go to one of the most egregious snubs from the Hall of Fame in my lifetime. Okay, we're talking about center field. Look at this list of center fielders. Willie Mays number 1, Ty Cobb 2, Tris Speaker 3, Mickey Mantle 4, Mike Trout 5, pretty nice, Griffey 6, DiMaggio 7, Snyder 8, Beltran 9. Beltran right now is able to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. I talked about that on my Hall of Fame video. I do think he's going to eventually get in. I don't think he's going to get in on the first ballot, but number 10 is Kenny Lofton. Kenny Lofton was a one and done guy. Andrew Jones is number 11, who hopefully can also get in, but Kenny Lofton has no chance to get into the Hall of Fame. I've heard the theory about the reason that Kenny Lofton isn't going to be a Hall of Famer is because he was on too many different teams. He spent 10 years in Cleveland, and then for the next 7 years, 8 years, he switched teams every single year. The excuse from what I've heard, if he was such an elite player, if he was a Hall of Famer, he wouldn't have been traded so many times, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. Juan Soto's gotten traded how many times? He's 26. Does that mean he's a bad player? Or does that mean he's an asset and the teams had situations where they needed to get rid of him? That's how I think of the Kenny Lofton situation. 68.4 WAR, 2,400 hits, a 299 career batting average, 622 stolen bases, 107 OPS plus. These are unbelievable numbers for a guy that was a one and done on the Hall of Fame ballot. Kenny Lofton was always, even when I was growing up, he was considered one of the best center fielders in the league, 6-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glove. We knew how talented Kenny Lofton was. We knew how good he was at baseball. It is atrocious that he's not in the Hall of Fame. And the last guy we're talking about is Dewey Evans. We have to talk about Dwight Evans. He should absolutely be a Hall of Famer. Okay, I am a certified Red Sox hater, and I know that Dewey Evans belongs in the Hall of Fame 100%. 67.2 WAR. He had 385 home runs, a 127 OPS plus, 3-time All-Star, 8-time Gold Glove, 2-time Silver Slugger. Why didn't he make it? I don't even have an excuse for the writers. I don't even have a thought process for why Dewey Evans was not elected into the Hall of Fame. If you look at the Jaws ratings, Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame, everybody's in the Hall of Fame. Mookie Betts, who's not qualified yet. Shoeless Joe Jackson, who threw an entire World Series. We understand he's banned from the game of baseball. Dwight Evans is next on the list. Everyone above him is in the Hall of Fame already, except for Shoeless Joe and except for Mookie, who's still an active player. How the fuck did Dwight Evans not make it to the Hall of Fame? I don't even know. I don't even understand. He's a legendary player. Get this guy in the Hall of Fame, man. His teammate Jim Rice is in the Hall of Fame. Jim Rice's numbers are worse than Dwight Evans. Dwight Evans literally has 20 less WAR than Jim Rice. And I'm not saying Jim Rice doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. He does. But how did you not put in Dwight Evans? I just don't understand. I just don't get what these baseball writers are thinking. That's my team of guys that should absolutely be in the Hall of Fame. I guess you could call it like sort of a top 10 list of non-Hall of Famers. I would definitely list it differently. I wouldn't do it by position. There's some rough snubs out there, but I think that all 10 of these guys belong in the Hall of Fame. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Who do you think should be in the Hall of Fame? Who do you think is the most egregious snub out of everybody? I would love to hear it. I love talking about the Hall of Fame. And if you stuck around this long, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Have yourself a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.